Most people don't fear failure. They fear living a life so safe it never required them to fail at all. So they dream, you dream. And in the beginning, that dream saved you. It gave you air when the world felt suffocating. It gave you color when life was gray. It gave you somewhere to go when nowhere else felt safe. You built it quietly, piece by piece. A world behind your eyes where nothing could break you, where your voice was clear, where your steps were certain, where your potential roared without risk. And for a time it was sacred. Because sometimes the dream is the only thing that keeps you alive long enough to become something more. But what once protected you can start to prevent you. Because no matter how safe it feels, no matter how many windows you paint onto its walls, a dream is still a cage if you never leave it. You called it imagination, you called it vision, you called it preparing. But the longer you stayed, the more it stopped being a vision of the future and started becoming a replacement for the present. And now it's hard to know where the dream ends and you begin. Because in the dream, everything works out. You succeed without failing. You're seen without judgment. You're perfect without the pressure of proving it. But Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And what he meant was this: the mind will give you a palace, but your soul will always want the wind. There is no awakening without risk, no becoming without discomfort. No life in a script that was never meant to be lived. The dream was never the problem. It gave you the map. But now you have to walk the terrain, even if it's messy. Even if it's nothing like you pictured. Because the dream was never the cage. The fear of failing it was. You say you're almost ready. But every day that passes, the silence grows heavier. You clean your space, you read another book, you rearrange the plan, but you don't start. And in your quietest moments, you know why. Because beginning means you no longer get to be the flawless version of yourself that lives in your mind. It means putting a crack in the perfect script you've written, but never performed. It means showing the world something that might not live up to the fantasy. And the truth is, you don't fear failure. You fear mediocrity. You fear showing up and discovering you're not as good as you were in your head. So you stall. Not out of laziness, but out of fear that reality might not love you back. This is the shadow of perfectionism. The kind that flatters you for being meticulous while quietly suffocating your potential. You tell yourself you're not procrastinating, you're preparing. But preparation without action becomes its own addiction. A kind of elegant paralysis. This is what Elizabeth Tallent knew too well. A writer so gifted the world expected greatness. But for 22 years, she wrote nothing. Not because she lacked stories, but because she feared they wouldn't be perfect. For 2 decades, her silence was misunderstood as discipline, but it was grief. Grief for a version of herself that existed only in the ideal. And here you are doing the same thing, polishing the cage, decorating the cell, waiting for the moment that finally feels like enough. But there's no such moment. There is no sign coming. There is no perfect day. There is only this one, and you. You think the dream will fade if you act before it's ready. But that's the lie the cage tells you. The truth is, dreams die in silence. They rot in over-planning. They vanish when you refuse to do the ugly, unfinished, necessary work of starting. So start. Even if your voice cracks. Even if your hands shake. Even if the words don't match the beauty of what you imagined. Start. And if this cracked something open in you, if this made you realize how long you've been standing at the edge of your own life, then say it. Write it below. I'm stepping out, not for me, not for validation. But for the next person still sitting behind the glass who needs to see someone else go first. Because sometimes the moment you speak it, the silence breaks, and the cage begins to crumble from the inside out. There is a moment in every dreamer's life when the fantasy stops being a gift and starts becoming a trap. It doesn't announce itself. There's no sudden fall, no collapse, just a quiet, creeping ache. You feel it when the life in your head starts to feel more meaningful than the one in front of you. You feel it when the version of you inside the dream feels more real than the one looking back in the mirror. At first, the dream was harmless, helpful, holy. It gave you something to reach for, a place where you were powerful, a future where you were enough. And for a time, it was a sacred refuge, sometimes the only place that didn't punish you for wanting more. But without action, dreams rot, not dramatically, subtly. They begin to replace the present. They begin to feed you safety instead of challenge. They begin to whisper that it's better to imagine forever than to risk being seen for real. And then you feel it, the mirror begins to crack. You look at the life you've built and realize you haven't built anything. You've been preparing, perfecting, waiting for the right moment. But the right moment never came because it was never meant to. You start to see the gap between who you are and who you said you'd become, between what you believe in and what you're actually doing, between the dream and the decision. And for a second you panic because the fantasy was flawless. And the real you? Tired, late, unfinished. But perfection never changed anyone. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And now the darkness is here, not to shame you, to show you what you've buried beneath the dream, your doubt, your guilt, your rage, your wild, unpolished longing to matter. That is your shadow, not your enemy, your invitation. To integrate, to risk, to live without a script. Because the version of you who only existed in your mind, that person doesn't get to create, doesn't get to love, doesn't get to rise. Only the version that moves, flawed, seen and shaking, gets to become. And yes, there will be grief. You'll grieve the dream. The one that kept you company in silence. The one that made you feel like you were doing something when you weren't. But grief is not the end. Grief is the door. And on the other side of that door isn't clarity. It's not confidence. It's permission. To finally stop being a symbol, to stop rehearsing, to live. If this chapter cut too close, if it named something you haven't dared to say out loud, don't just keep listening. Say it below, "The mirror cracked for me." And let someone else know they're not the only one waking up. There comes a moment when the edge becomes unbearable, when imagining isn't enough, when silence starts to scream, when even the safety you built begins to feel like a threat. You've done the dreaming, you've done the planning. You've sat in the beautiful cage and watched the door stay open. But now the question isn't, what if I try? The question is, what happens if I don't? You're standing at the threshold, and everything in you is pulling both ways. Forward, into risk, into truth, into becoming. Backward, into fantasy, into control, into the comfort of almost. This is the point where most people stop. They don't go back, but they don't go forward either. They stall. They linger in the doorway. They spend their lives balancing between who they were and who they never became. Because to cross this line is to shed something. Not just your fear, your identity. The part of you who needed to be adored before they could act. The version of you who spoke in polished quotes but never raised their real voice. The you who was only ever alive in imagination. And that death feels like loss, but it's not, it's resurrection. Clarissa Pinkola Estes said, "You have to leave the city of your comfort and go into the wilderness of your intuition. This wilderness isn't marked." There is no applause here, no guarantees, just you, raw, uncertain, awake. And the first steps will feel wrong. Your timing will be off. You will second-guess every move, but you will also feel something deeper than relief, deeper than excitement. You will feel real, that sound. That sensation that something inside you is moving again. That's your life. Not the one you imagined, the one you reclaimed. And you will wonder why you waited so long to choose it. You will look back and see the cage still beautiful, still open, and you'll know it was never holding you. You were just afraid of what it meant to be free. So if this is your line, if this is the moment where pretending finally feels heavier than becoming, then say it. Right now, in the comments. For you, for them, this is my threshold. Because someone else is watching, still stuck in the doorway. Still deciding if they're ready to become real. And your voice might be the one that gives them permission. You thought leaving the cage would feel like flying. But the first flight always feels like falling, because now it's real. There's no more theory, no more preparation. No more safety net made of dreams. Only the page in front of you, the blank screen, the microphone, the moment. And for the first time, your power doesn't come from possibility. It comes from presence. It's not graceful. It's not perfect. It's shaky, it's awkward, it's exposed, but that's exactly why it matters. This is what the dream never warned you about. That real life doesn't give standing ovations for beginning. That your first attempts will be ignored. That your best effort might not be enough, yet. Out here, the metrics are brutal, but the meaning is honest. Because when you stop polishing your potential and start showing up with your actual self, you're no longer trying to impress your imaginary future. You're trying to impact the world you're actually living in. And that world won't always applaud you, but it will grow you. You will fail, you will cringe. You will lose things you thought you needed. But you will also gain the one thing the dream never gave you: weight. Your actions will start to leave footprints. Your voice will start to echo in places beyond your mind. Your name will start to attach to things that exist in the world, not just in your thoughts. And over time, something even stranger will happen. You'll begin to prefer the mess. Because the mess is where momentum lives. It's where the story gets good. It's where perfection finally dies and progress begins to breathe. You are no longer the character in the dream. You are the one writing it, with ink, not fantasy. You're the one taking the dream and dragging it into the dirt until it grows roots. And those roots, they don't ask for elegance. They ask for water, sun, time, and truth. You are the truth now. Not the idea of yourself. Not the one you rehearsed. You are the one who said yes without a guarantee. Who stood up with shaking legs. Who launched something into the world without knowing if it would land. This is becoming not neat, not glorious, but real. If you're here, right now, already in the fall, already feeling the friction of motion, write it below: I'm flying messy. Because someone out there is still afraid of the fall. And they need to see that the sky is still worth it. There will come a morning when you forget what it felt like to stall. Not because it didn't hurt, but because movement became your default. You'll wake up and instead of asking, what should I do today? You'll ask, what can I build next? Because now you've crossed the threshold. Not once, but again and again. Every time you doubt, every time you delay, you cross it again. That's the thing no one tells you. Leaving the cage isn't a one-time act, it's a practice. Every day you'll feel the pull to crawl back in. To imagine instead of act. To perfect instead of progress. But now you know better. You know what silence costs. You know what a dream becomes when it's kept locked too long. You know that your imagination is not the enemy, but it's not your home either. It's your compass, not your shelter. And as you move further into your life, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop performing your potential. You start becoming your truth. So you stop waiting to feel ready. You stop measuring your worth by how closely your reality matches the dream. And you start measuring it by how often you show up, not show up perfectly, show up truthfully. Show up when you're tired, when you're uncertain, when it might not work. You become the dream that survived doubt, the one that crawled out of your head and into the dirt, the one that started breathing the moment you stopped controlling it. You realize you were never meant to stay safe. You were meant to live. And now your existence leaves a trail. Not just of what you imagined, but of what you gave, what you tried, what you failed at and came back stronger. And someone will see that. Someone will find your voice when they've lost their own. Someone will find your words when they're still locked inside silence. And that's when you'll understand this was never just about you. It was about becoming so real that others remembered it was possible. So if this story became your story, if you know you're not just thinking differently but walking differently, then say it. Not to impress, to mock it. To leave a message for the next person. I lived the dream outside the cage. And they'll see that and think, maybe I can too. Because now you're not just free, you're a path. And somewhere, someone else is already following.